All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another tier list as part of the rubber match. This is the fourth one that I'm doing as part of this channel, and the third one that I'll be doing that revolves around video games. And with me recently completing a 100% file of Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, which was actually the file I started as a child back in 2003. I thought it would be cool to go through and rank all of the levels, and this tier list template actually includes all the locations in the game. So, in addition to the main levels that we'll be looking at, we also have the three hub worlds, the speedway levels, and the boss levels as well. So, I'll be taking a look at all of them and basically ranking them my favorite to least favorite across the board on this tier list. Taking into account how much fun I have in each level, how creative I think each level is, and which ones I guess make me the most excited to play again whenever I revisit the game. I will say I'm not going to be including Dragon Shores, this last one, on here just because there is nothing to do in the level. It's just kind of like a prize for you completing the game. You can't really compare it to any other part of the game here, so I will be leaving that out. But we'll start off with Glimmer. In Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage is the only one of the original trilogy to start Spyro not in a homeworld level, as he starts in the first regular level of the game in Glimmer. And I think it's a really cool setting for the game to start off in. I think the emphasis of getting enemies to unlock different parts of the level in terms of having a unique power up that's required to get an orb. I like that that's introduced right away, as that becomes certainly a staple of the game. Same can be said with Moneybags. Are going to have to pay him in order to advance in a lot of the levels in different parts of the game. So I think it sets that precedent very well. But I also like that the level's quite linear. You get through it, you get to the ending point of the level where you get the talisman for completing it, and then there's another section of the level behind that point where you can find two more orbs. So I really think the logical progression of how the level works is really good. It's a great way to introduce players to the game. I think it's generally a very aesthetically pleasing and calm level. Yeah, great first level. I think in any video game, this is kind of what you want them to look like. So I'm going to put that up in the A tier. Next, we have the first hub world in Summer Forest, and I think an amazing part of these hub worlds in this game is a score that Stuart Copeland of the Police put together, which he did for all three of the Spyro trilogy games. But I really love how the hub world music sounds in all three of these levels. It's very ambient, very calm. It's not something that's supposed to be super noticeable, but it somehow really captures the moment especially well. And I think Summer Forest in particular, a great way to start the game. I love that Ripto's Rage got rid of enemies in the homeworld. It just makes them a lot easier to navigate. And this level's just so greatly designed. You start off kind of in that back area where you have some grass. There's a water area, which after you learn how to swim can also lead to a secret. And then right when you think the hub world has ended, when there's just that massive expanse of water, you can swim under it and get to a whole new indoor level where you have this geodome type setup with a couple more levels for access. You'll have to backtrack once you learn how to climb ladders to get to the upper part of that level and pick up another orb. I just like how there's a lot of, Easter eggs in this homeworld. It's so calm, it's so relaxing, and it really just makes you want to keep exploring in the game. This is an excellent level. I'm going to put that in the S tier. I think a huge part of my enjoyment of this game in particular are how great the hub worlds are. But next, we'll go into the next regular level that you encounter, that being Colossus in the first world. Personally, I do think that this might be one of the more forgettable levels of the game, even though I do love the hockey mini game that you get, where two of the three orbs of this level reside in. Um, the chance to unlock different parts of the level as you move through with the NPCs, doing that work for you as you progress through the level. Which I think is a common theme that you see throughout a lot of these levels, is the unique NPCs that inhabit each world. You have to complete a certain task, and then they're going to progress you through the level. So I think it's cool that that precedent is set in this level, where that wasn't really as abundantly clear in Glimmer. But yeah, I just feel like this game offers so many really cool, memorable levels that this one does kind of fall into the more forgettable category, but I think the hockey minigame, one of the more fun ones in the game. So I think that is enough to put it in the B tier. After that, we'll have my preferred option of those first two levels that you see once you get into that next area, Summer Forest, and that would be Idle Springs. This one only has two orbs, but I love the mini games that you have to get the two orbs by. It's very fun to progress through the level naturally. I also like how it gives you the opportunity to swim underwater. This is a first normal level where you have that chance to explore some stuff underwater, which I think is really cool. Um, yeah, I mean, not really much else to say about this one. I love the soundtrack. It's probably one of my favorites in the game, and that soundtrack does appear again when we get to Fracture Hills in the second hub world. But I just think this level's really creative. It looks really nice. It kind of takes some elements of appearance from Summer Forest. And I, like I said, I think the way that you have to get the orbs in this level are a lot different than what you would have encountered in the first Spyro, from the RNG based minigame where you have to feed certain fish to the one enemy, and then, of course, the other one where you're kind of solving different puzzles in succession of one another that an NPC is giving you in order to get the orb. But I think a fun level to explore, one that, feels like there's always more parts that you haven't seen yet. I'm going to put that in the A tier, maybe a bit below Glimmer, but still a big fan of that one. Next up, we have Hurricos. This is a very dark and gloomy level, the first one that you encounter in that kind of geodome section that you get in Summer Forest. I would say that this is also the first level of the game that introduces some real difficulty for you, whether that be just by progressing through the level and getting around some pretty irritating enemies, but also two of the four orbs that you have to get in this level are pretty tricky as well, from moving across the frozen fan panels. I don't know what else to call it really there. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense, but then also where you have to chase around the light bulb thieves. Thieves is also, I would say, one of the more difficult orbs of the first hub world. But I think it's really cool. This is probably the biggest level that you would have encountered at this point. I think there's a good amount of secrets. I also like that you have some gems on your first playthrough. You're wondering, like, how do I get to that part of the level? And I think that that's an element that you see in later levels in this game and then later on throughout the series as well. But this is a good one. I like how, despite it being in the summer, bright themed hub world, that you get a level that's dark, gloomy, kind of changes the mood for the player. And it reminds it that you're exploring a set of very diverse worlds and levels here. So a fun one, maybe a bit frustrating at times, but I do like this one. I do think it's one that stands out to me when replaying it. So I'll also put this in the A tier, probably right on par with Idle Springs. Next, we have Sunny Beach, which is the next level in that Geodome section in Summer Forest. A more explicitly summer-themed level, of course. A large part of it you can traverse underwater as well, which is necessary for some of the orbs. This level is aesthetically very nice. I think I love that it captures the feeling of the homeworld itself, but it's one that in and of itself does feel a bit forgettable. Two of the orbs in this level are from that turtle suit mini game, which can be a bit frustrating, and it's also frustrating to have to backtrack to it because you need to climb up a ladder to access that part of the level. And then also the Super Flame orb that you have to Super Flame all the chests to get the orb for. That's pretty difficult, and I feel like that takes a few times to know where you're going at through the level. It's a lot of fast swimming that you have to do during that section. So definitely some difficult parts for where you're at in the game, but I think as a level itself, it feels like it maybe could have been a bit more creative. Like, I like that there's a level that reflects what the hub world is, but at the same time, I feel like I'm looking for a bit more than just, a general beach level where that captures the whole theme of it. So this isn't one of my favorites, partially because of the difficult orbs for where you're at and having to backtrack, but also just because I feel like this game has levels that stand out as more memorable. So I'll actually put this down in the C tier. But speaking of more memorable levels, the final normal level in Summer Forest certainly fits that description in Aquaria Towers. This is one where you have to pay money bags in order to lower a wall to access the level, but it's well worth it, and you have to do it to get the talisman to move on, anyways. But the coolest part about this level is that it starts off and you're in this large, expansive, dry area, and then you kill some enemies and hit a switch, and then it fills up the area with water. And then that's kind of how you progress through the level, is that parts that weren't accessible before because you're on the ground, now you can swim up to them and get to them. And I think the coolest part of this level that really makes it stand out as one of my favorites in the game and even the series is that after you're done getting the talisman, you could swim up on top of the tower and you're in this super large, expansive ocean type environment. That's where you have the two orbs connected to Hunter and the following the Stingray, which is a very fun mini game. And honestly, just swimming around that massive area, especially on the Reignited trilogy, where I think they did an excellent job at making it look so updated and fresh and clean. It is one of my favorite parts of the game. I think it's so cool that it gives you that true open world feel, even just for a little bit in one section of the level, and how it is just a section of the level that you go back in towards the center and you're in the normal level where you're going through more narrow areas and where most of the enemies are. So I just think it's really creative, and I really like how this game has those levels where there's two really distinct sections. I was kind of talking about it a little bit before with Glimmer, did it a little bit. You kind of see it with Hurricos with one of their mini games, but this is the first level where it's really, really distinct. It feels like two levels in one. And it is one of my favorites in the game. I'm going to put this up in the S tier. Big fan of that one. Next, we have the first of four Speedway levels. These were called Flight levels in the first Spyro. They changed the name to Speedway in this one. And unfortunately, throughout the whole series, they do all feel very similar. I like how in this game they add an orb challenge from Hunter in each one of the levels, and they kind of go a step further in Year of the Dragon by adding 3 eggs for each Speedway level. But overall, this is probably the one that I feel like is the most forgettable. It feels like one of the Spyro 1 Speedways, just not really distinct. The theme doesn't really hit you that much. I mean, ocean, I feel like you're flying around water in every flight level in the previous game, so it does kind of feel like a little bit of a copy and paste in that regard. I'm going to put this one in the D tier. Maybe the most forgettable level of the game, honestly. Next up, we have Crush's Dungeon, the first boss of the game. I like how Ripto's Rage really took a step up in the boss battle department. Bosses were entirely optional in Spyro the Dragon up until you get to Nasty Nork. They were just part of a regular level, and I like how this is its own dedicated boss fight. Crush, I don't feel like is the toughest battle, but I like how it's a real boss battle, and that's something that we hadn't gotten yet in the series. It makes it feel more significant when you move on to the next hub world, which you have to be Crush in order to be able to do. It's not my favorite boss fight in the game. In fact, it's probably my least favorite overall, but I do want to give it credit for kind of bringing that to the series, and we see that again in Year of the Dragon, where the boss fights are just much more developed, they're fun, they're challenging, and I think it's a solid and worthy addition that the series needed. But I'll put this one in C tier. And next we have what is probably my favorite level of the game, maybe even the series, in Autumn Plains, the second of the 3 hub worlds. I mean, I love it on both the Reignited trilogy and in the original, but there's something about the serenity of the original PS1 graphics, the sunset fall-like atmosphere, how absolutely massive this hub world is, and I think especially the location of the 2 secret orbs is incredible, and it has the best glide in the series, from when you're on top of the massive building that houses most of the levels and you glide across the entire stage to get to an isolated tower to find the orb. I mean, I feel like that's really what the series was going for, is a platformer that's giving you something that no other platformer gives you. Mario and Crash Bandicoot and Sonic the Hedgehog can't fly across an entire level, and I think it's really cool that this level makes that, a major focus of it because it's where the orbs are, but it's also, on the other hand, kind of an afterthought because just exploring the level, seeing where all the other portals for the other stages are. I love how you have, the massive section on the ground where you can access a decent amount of the levels, and then you go up the ladder, and then you have this kind of intimidating and ominous hallway, but then on one end you have the wall, and on the other end you're looking out, and it's just the sky. And I think the way it especially looks on the PS1, it's just so emblematic of what graphics looked like in the era. It's so current and captivating at the time. And I think even 26 years later, there's still a lot of merit to how that looks and how pleasing and comforting it can be to a player. And I think it's a big part of what makes this game and series so comforting and cozy to a lot of players. But yeah, that's going to go in the S tier. Don't need to say much more about that. Next, we'll have what is a fan favorite for levels across the series in Skelos Badlands. Really cool, kind of a lava fire themed level. You also see the NPCs. It's kind of like a sister level to the next one we'll talk about in Crystal Glacier, which is kind of like an ice version of Skelos Badlands. But really fun mini games for the orbs in this one. Really cool hidden areas. I love how you could get the invincibility to go across the fire as well. Just a lot of cool things to explore in this one. I feel like there's reasons for it to be a fan favorite. I especially like the mini game where you're finding the different enemies throughout the level that are carrying the bones. That's something that we see again in Year of the Dragon. It kind of forces you to look into every nook and cranny of the stage, which a lot of these levels don't exactly do. So I do think that this level is indeed worthy of much of the praise that it gets, and it is indeed one of my favorite ones in the game. So this will also go up in the S tier. I will probably take Aquaria Towers over it, though. Next up, we have Crystal Glacier. This is kind of like the snow-themed sister level to Skelos Badlands. A fun one. I just do think that there's better themed ice levels in the series. I especially think to Frozen Altars in the following game just feels like there's much more to explore and do, and you have the mini games. This level, you paid money bags for access at one part. There is the fun orb mini game where you're flying through and you have to flame all of the dragons in time in one go around to get the orb. That's definitely challenging, but also I would say one of the more fun orbs to go after in the game. But outside of that, it does kind of feel like one of the stages that's maybe a bit more on the forgettable side. It just feels like maybe a bit more could have been done with the snow and ice theme, and this one does feel a bit run of the mill at times. So I'll put this one in the B tier. Definitely not my least favorite, but not one that I'm looking forward to play specifically when I boot up the game. Next up, we have Zephyr. This is, I would say, maybe the first level in the game that's really presenting a significant challenge to the player. There's really some tough parts in this. I would say, especially, having birds coming towards you, and there's a lot of projectiles that Spyro has to face in this level. But I really like how large it is, how there's several distinct sections in this level, and how certain orbs, in particular the one where you have to herd all of the cows into one specific area, they force you to traverse throughout the level and kind of get creative on how you're moving from one part of the stage to another. I do really like the size in this. I think the NPC theme is really nice. I just think that, we hadn't really seen a level quite like this in Spyro 1, and I think it's a good mix of both intimidating and challenging, but also really fun and comforting at the same time, and also another level that's quite aesthetically pleasing. You're probably going to spend some time in this one, a talisman and 4 orbs to get, but a fun one and one of my preferred ones of the game. I'll put this one up in the A tier. Next, we have Breeze Harbor. This is one that most players will remember for the challenging minigame where you'll have to hear Trouble with the Trollier at least 49 or 50 times until you finally get it. But I also think that that's an example of a minigame in this game and in the series in general that's challenging and frustrating, but also very fun and incredibly satisfying when you finally get through it. And that's really the case with the trolley minigame, which is the headline of this level. But I think even beyond that, this is a cool level. I like how separated it is and how you're flying and getting whirlwinded from one section to another. and how much it emphasizes flight, which does kind of remind me of what you get with the hub world that this level's located in. Certainly some frustrating enemies here and there. Maybe, the other orb where you have to flame, I believe the sunshines it is, can be a bit tedious. But this is still a fun level, and I think because of that mini game, it's one that players of the game aren't going to forget. I'll put this in the upper B tier. Don't quite like it as much as those, but certainly one that I still have some fun in. Next up is Scorch. This is another one that I do think might be a bit more on the forgettable side. It is a desert themed level, which, we kind of get again a little bit with Shady Oasis. Not that that's entirely desert themed because it's not completely outside, but just a little bit of a similar feel and atmosphere, and kind of similar to what I was saying about Crystal Glacier. This does feel like a theme that was chosen and then not much else was done afterwards to really make it feel distinct. Once again, you have a mini game where you're going to be doing plenty of backtracking through the level. That can be frustrating as well. And then, of course, the two mini games with Hunter for the two orbs can also present quite the tedious challenge for players. But yeah, this is one that I'm not really ever feeling hyped to play when I'm going through the game. I do think it's one of the more forgettable levels. I'll put this one in the C tier. Next, one that many fans will call the toughest level in the series because of some of the orbs and gems you have to get. I wouldn't fully disagree in Fracture Hills. This does have that same bumpin' soundtrack that we heard on Idle Springs, so that does help it out. But this level is frustrating and annoying, and there might be a few things that I like about it, but the fact that when you have to backtrack, you have to hear the bagpipes every time just to progress through the level. It does really spell out Ripto's Rage's biggest weakness, which is in that you have to backtrack so many times because you do have to return to this level after learning the head bash skill in the third hub world. Yeah, and I mean the supercharging segment they have to do to go across the level in order to get an orb, and then do it again in order to get a really tough chest that supercharging through is the only way to break, does make it frustrating. This is maybe the most tedious level in the series, and I think whatever makes it enjoying is certainly outweighed by the amount of annoying things that you have to do in this level. So I will put this in the lower C tier, just not a fan. Magma Cone, on the other hand, is also a pretty challenging level, and I would say one of the more challenging ones in the series, but I just think does a better job at keeping you engaged and making it feel like you're still exploring. Fracture Hills just kind of feels like this one very large, ominous, but, kind of also homogenous area where nothing's really that different. You have the lower level by the lava, you have the upper level with the trees that go out and attack you. Magma Cone has a much more linear feel where you're progressing through to different parts, and I think especially the part where you're climbing up the volcano, I feel like that's the part where as a kid it felt like I was really far in the game. It was at an intimidating, challenging part to, move up and get the talisman there. And then after the fact that you can drop in, and then there's that really challenging mini game with Hunter in the ice cavern part of the level. And I think it's cool that you have opposite ends of the spectrum. This is a volcanic, lava themed level, and then you're getting a section that's an ice cavern. I always thought that that was really cool to include that in the same stage. And it's one of the levels that does have those two very distinct sections that I think really improve the experience and make it feel like there's always something more to look out for and explore. So as frustrating as this level can be, I do really like it. I'm going to put this one in the upper A tier. Next up, we have Shady Oasis. This one you have to cross a bridge on that upper floor up in Autumn Plains to get to. Kind of has a genie theme to it. This level is fun. It's one that I feel like is a lot of fun to play through when you're just going through and getting the talisman. The linear progression of the level makes a lot of sense. It's very easy to figure out what to do. But backtracking to it, on the other hand, can be a little bit frustrating. There's a lot of areas where you can fall. There's a few areas where you feel you can make a jump to the next part of the level, but you really can't. So there's backtracking within backtracking in this level for when you have to go back and get some of the orbs. But going through and getting the talisman, it's enjoyable, but I just don't feel like this one stands out as one of the game's most enjoyable levels. I'll put this in the B tier, just above Crystal Glacier. Next, we have two speedway levels, as Autumn Plains had two speedways. First of those being Metro Speedway. This one kind of has an urban, city themed atmosphere. This is probably my favorite speedway of the game. I also think the mini game for the orb is quite challenging, but also fun in this one as well. Really cool level. I think that it's nice that there's some hidden areas in this you don't exactly see in other speedway levels. I think definitely a step up from Ocean Speedway. I'll put this in the C tier, above Crush's Dungeon and Fracture Hills. And then we have Icy Speedway. This one also is a fun mini game where you're going through the rings in a similar way to what we saw with that Stingray challenge that you do with Hunter and Aquaria Towers. But other than that, it just does kind of feel like an edited version of the ocean theme level that we saw in the first hub world, and also some of the flight levels that we saw in the first game. So this one, I like it more in Ocean Speedway. I like the mini game. Still doesn't really stand out to me that much. I'll put this one above Ocean Speedway in the D tier. And then it's Gulp's Overlook, the second boss battle. I think this is a really good boss fight. I had a lot of trouble with it as a kid. I even think going back to it and playing through the game to this day, this boss battle gives me a little bit of a fit. I think it's an appropriate step up in difficulty for where you are in the game, especially for a game that only has three main bosses. Yeah, I mean, not much else to say. It is similar to the Crush fight, but just a step up, and I feel like a bit better done. So put that in the C tier, just above Crush. Next up, we have Winter Tundra, the third and final hub world. I did write a piece ranking all of the hub worlds in the original Spyro trilogy. This was the one I ranked last of the three in this game. But that's only because my one complaint in this level is just that you want more. It's so quaint and beautiful. Once again, especially I love how it looks on the PS1, and how these graphics look in this environment is truly awesome. But I think even for it being for it being the smallest hub world in the game, it's still fascinating how many secrets there are to explore. And I feel like that's what I mean when I'm saying that, like, I wish that there was more, because you already see numerous secret paths in this level. If there were more in another section, like, it feels like there's still more to explore. But there is a limit to it. And I do feel like if this maybe had the amount of nooks and crannies and different things that Autumn Plains has, that I would even rank it above that. I don't think it's quite at that level, but I do still really enjoy this homeworld, and I love how it kind of has a different feel than most last homeworlds of the game. When you're at the end of the game, whether it be a Mario game or a Crash game, or I even think of the first Spyro, Nasty's world, it's intimidating, it's ominous. I like how this kind of has maybe a few of those elements, in the sense that, like, it's dark out and it's supposed to make you feel cold, but at the same time, it doesn't sacrifice any of that comforting that this game has provided the entire way through, and I do really like that feature to this level. So this is also going to go in my S tier. I'll put it right there, in between Aquaria Towers and Skelos Badlands. Next up, we have Mystic Marsh, the first level that you encounter within Winter Tundra. Not a huge fan of this one. I think the biggest reason is just the weird Professor Orb mini game that you have to do, where you have to trade in a pencil for an apple or something like that. I just feel like it didn't make sense to me as a kid, and as an adult, I had to look it up as well. It's just kind of a weird, goofy mini game. The NPCs also look a little goofy in this level. I do like that you have this section where, once you get enough particles to get the power up, that you can access an upper part in the level. Gives you that same power up that we originally saw back in Colossus in the first homeworld. But yeah, I feel like in comparison to the other levels in this world, this one does kind of pale a little bit. I'll put this one in the upper C tier. Next up, we have Cloud Temples. This is a fun one. I feel like one that kind of matches the scope that you're looking for a level in the last homeworld. Definitely a few challenging things about this one, especially the mini game where you have to hide from the quote unquote secret agent to get to the end of the level and make sure that he doesn't see you. I think that that's one of the more challenging orbs that you can access in the game. I do think that the orbs that you get in this level in general are a fun challenge. I also think of the one upstairs where you have to freeze certain blocks in order to access a certain part of the level. Yeah, I mean, I think that this matches where you're at in the game pretty well. I feel like it's a step up for Mystic Marsh. It's a little bit more fun to revisit, and I think that this level has a decent amount of secrets. Whether it's finding a missile in a hidden location to get a gem chest. I think that this level does a good job, and there's still plenty of places to mess up and for it to feel intimidating as it should for it being at the end of the game. But I'll put this in the high B tier. Big fan of Cloud Temples. Next is Robotica Farms. This one is also quite challenging. The second to last, regular level that you're going to encounter in this game. I think it's an interesting theme and concept. It's kind of a weird collision to have this rural farm atmosphere, but then to have exclusively robots on it and a lot of moving technology around. Uh, but yeah, this level feels larger than it perhaps is. I feel like it's one of the easier levels in the game to get lost in, which I think is probably the most frustrating part about it. You also, of course, have a pretty challenging supercharge orb to get in this level as well. But I still think it's a fun concept, and I like the more open world sandboxy environment to mix it in with some of the more linear levels in this game. I think that this level executes that quite well. I'll also put this in the low A tier. Big fan of that one. Next, we have the final regular level of the game in Metropolis. I was always a big fan of this level, but I really particularly fell in love with it after we got to the reignited version, where this level just really gives you a really cool Fruitager Arrow type feel. You have this cool futuristic city, especially once you get to the dome area and you get to fly around. It does just feel like you're in this green, sustainable, cool future. But even when you're going through it the first time before you get to that area of the level, I like how it's linear and it kind of eases you in to that grand ending of the level where you have a lot of narrow hallways with tough enemies that you have to defeat. There's also the kind of pseudo boss that you have to face with the ox on the upper level of one of the indoor parts of the stage. But this is, I think, my favorite regular level of the game. I think it's just really cool, especially once you get to the end and you have the freedom to fly around on top and you see hidden gem balloons and gems on top of some of the buildings. I just think it really injects that Y2K futurism that was really big at the time of the game's release in 1999. And I think the modern take that they put on it in 2018 when this game was remastered was excellent and also really fitting with the nostalgia that a lot of people, my age and maybe a bit older and younger alike, have for that era in technology. So, really cool level. And I also think appropriately challenging for being the final regular level that you're likely going to encounter in the game. So I'll put this in the S tier, actually above Summer Forest and below Autumn Plains. Next up, we have Canyon Speedway. I think a unique, cool theme to have for a speedway. Probably more so than the other speedways in this game. I'd even theming wise give this one a slight edge over Metro, especially because it differs so much from the theme of the homeworld. But I do like the design and layout of Metro Speedway a bit more. This level definitely feels like it can get a bit frustrating. There's some really tight turns that you have to make. The orb challenge is pretty tough as well, but I think that's appropriate for where it is in the game too. So I like this one. This is probably my second favorite speedway of the four, so I'll put this one just below Metro Speedway in the C tier. And then the final one we'll be looking at today is Ripto's Arena, the final boss fight of the game. I think a good fight too. I think that this was a lot better and more entertaining than what you get at the end of the first Spyro with Nasty Nork. I like how orbs play a central role in the fight and how they change colors too. I always thought as a kid playing through it for the first time that it was cool that, you've seen these green orbs throughout the game and then all of a sudden, of course, the big, villain at the end of the game is able to change these treasures that you've been collecting to whatever color that he pleases. I just felt like, especially with how villains were depicted at the time, that it was very fitting and, went along with enhancing that childhood imagination that at least I had first time playing through the game. But yeah, I think a fitting boss fight, it's more difficult than Crush and Gulp, but I feel like with everything in the Spyro series, it isn't overwhelmingly difficult. You may stumble on it a little bit, but I feel like once you figure out what you have to do in order to get through it, that this boss fight isn't too intimidating or keeping anybody from finishing the game. But I think it's an appropriate scaling up, and I'll put this above the speedways here in the C tier, and that's what I got. So there's a look at the 28 main locations in Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage and how I would tier them out on a tier list. So thank you all for watching. I will look to return with another tier list shortly. Probably video game related, maybe sports related too, as we're in the middle of the MLB postseason. Plenty of action left in that regard. But to keep up with any content that I'm making, you could, of course, subscribe to this YouTube channel. But also, I'll have my Blue Sky, Twitch, and the website link, the rubbermatch.blog. You can find that in the description below. But that's all I have for today. Hope everybody has a great day, and thank you for watching.